What is next
What does
5
that
years
mean?
of...
On Friday, Lively filed a civil rights complaint accusing Baldoni of sexual harassment and retaliation.
I thought it was really surprising that they would want to drag all this up again. I think it's crazy. I think it's counterproductive. Lord knows, but it seems to me that Baldoni certainly has a case here. If the New York Times is just running with whatever Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds fame machine want them to run with, that's not okay.
So I'm here with Vanessa Santos of Renegade PR, and she is a major consultant, has repped a number of people that you've heard of, but we won't say here. How are you, Vanessa?
I'm good. I'm so glad to finally be able to be doing one of these with you. I love your work so much, and I watch your stuff all the time. I'm like geeking out.
Well, this is a perfect topic. This is just taking the internet by storm. I have not seen anything getting this kind of interest and engagement since Amber Heard and Johnny Depp.
Yes.
So we're talking about the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni controversy. And before we get into the latest, I just wanted to ask you, when did you start hearing about this? When did you become aware of this controversy?
Summer, I guess it is when I first really started seeing these headlines and hearing about the scandal. But even when I started seeing this stuff, I kind of thought it was like a publicity stunt. And it kind of reminded me of the "Don't Worry, Darling" stuff, where I never really knew how much truth there was to the drama behind the scenes.
So Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni controversy.
Even when I started seeing this stuff, I kind of thought it was like a publicity stunt.
This is like a psyop that everybody involved is basically playing this game so they can get hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue that they wouldn't have otherwise. Because I feel like the reason why this movie ended up making so much money is because of all of the crazy drama and buzz surrounding it. But I would assume that Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, now if we're getting into the realm of filing lawsuits, $250 million lawsuits, by Justin Baldoni against the New York Times. And today his lawyer came out and said that he will definitely be suing Blake Lively as well. And then Blake Lively, of course, now she has finally filed a lawsuit against Baldoni. She had filed a complaint with the California Civil Rights Commission. And so I'm wondering, let me put it this way. I think at first, when we started hearing about all of this drama, there was a real groundswell of support on the internet for Baldoni and against Blake Lively. And as you know, over the last 6 months, there's been this narrative that on social media that's coalesced around the idea that Blake Lively is a mean girl, that she's a bully. People have selected clips from various interviews in which she does come across as having a kind of an attitude.
Right. I mean, what is next
What does
5
that
years
mean?
of... Well, in terms of trying, I mean, you apparently are not going to sing if you didn't think you can sing.
I sang in this movie.
Well,
Did
yeah.
you see the movie?
I did see the movie. But I mean...
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
Do you guys love wearing those kind of clothes that you...
Working in digital.
Everyone wants to talk about the clothes, but I wonder if they would ask the men about the clothes.
I would.
Oh, it's so
Just
good.
like it's,
thing, you know?
yeah, it's not just the women that have the clothes.
But
I feel like the women
Victoria-
get the conversation.
This movie is going to affect people. The themes of this movie, they're going to want to tell you about their lives. What's the best way for them to be able to talk to you about this?
Asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share. Or I could just location share you and then we could...
So that was the social media buzz on this, but it kind of blew over, I felt like, and the movie made a ton of money. And I felt like that narrative was kind of coming to an end, and Blake Lively, was coming out of this. I know it was probably a rough time for her with some of the social media narratives, but she was coming out of this as a very wealthy, successful woman, having produced and starred in this film. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it had really blown over. And then she filed a complaint alleging workplace toxicity, sexual harassment. And then now, yes, of course, she's sued Baldoni. Well, Baldoni recently sued the New York Times, $250 million defamation case, which, as you know, those cases are really difficult to prove, but $250 million defamation case against the New York Times, alleging that Blake Lively basically colluded with them. They colluded with each other to alter reporting of a text conversation to make it seem more incriminating for Baldoni than it actually was. And so he alleged that texts were altered, that the order was changed in text conversation. and so forth, and not only in the New York Times article, but also in Blake Lively's filing with California Civil Rights Commission. And so that's where we are right now. This whole thing is blown up. And so I'm just wondering, I have several questions for you. But first of all, do you think, as a PR consultant, do you think that it's wise for either side to be filing lawsuits?
I think really that's what's so fascinating about it, like the dynamic. I mean, Reynolds and Blake is this fame machine. They're fame monsters. They're untouchable. And I think that it's clear that they decided that they do not want anything to do with this Justin guy. They want to take him down. And I don't think that Justin has any option. I mean, he wants to save his career. He wants to save his life. I mean, this is a man who staked his whole brand on this male feminist thing. And not only is this just a little bit of like a little public feud here, it's not he said, she said. She is hitting him 100% where it hurts. He is a sexual harasser now. He is somebody who emotionally and mentally abuses women, who storms in on them while they're breastfeeding. I mean, these are very disgusting, disturbing things when this is a man who literally wrote the book. I mean, what's the book called?
Undoing my masculinity, or yeah, exactly. And he's interested in toxic masculinity, right?
Yeah, and he does the podcast about this too. I mean, there's no way that Justin had an option. He had to fight back, and he had to fight back with everything he had. And it looks like the guy's doing a killer job. I mean, he brought receipts. Blake can say, oh, his PR company made me look bad. Honey, you did that all on your own. You know, you said these things to these reporters and treated these interviewers like crap. That's you. Justin didn't make you do that.
Yeah, she definitely gave a number of tone deaf interviews, and definitely comes across as an egotistical woman with a real chip on her shoulder. But what you said about Baldoni and the entire brand that he's created, you know, you and I know we have a bias against this brand of male feminism and the man bun and all of that. And I'm sure you have the same reaction I do when I looked up, because I didn't know who Baldoni was when this whole thing started. Yeah. When I look him up and I see the man bun and the title of his book and podcast, Undoing My Masculinity. And then you see that 30-minute proposal video that he did for his wife, which I know a number of people think it's romantic, but to me and others, it comes across as being overdone and really, I think, attention seeking, but that's a matter of perspective. I'm sure his wife loved it. But as much as I, like you, am skeptical of the male feminist brand, and, you know, when I watch Baldoni's podcast, he and his wife just talking about the patriarchy nonstop, and I'm like, okay. But I will say this, I have come to believe that as much of a turnoff as it may be to me personally, I do think that he has a real, genuine, longstanding interest in this idea of gender, and his politics or his perspective might be different from mine. But this is a brand and a concept that he has spent years and years and years of his life, whether we're talking about books, podcasts, now movies, investing in. And so for Blake Lively to come along and to basically publicly like cut him off at the knees, basically, I mean, she single-handedly, with her allegations, has canceled him and destroyed him. And so I feel like you, that his back was really up against a wall. And the only way these days, I feel like, to get people to take you seriously, file that lawsuit, show that you mean business, and then go out on the offensive. And that is definitely what he is doing. And I have read that he has some very wealthy, powerful backers. Mm-hmm. His producers, the other guys at Wayfarer Studios with him. There's a billionaire, a friend of his who's a billionaire, who's also bankrolling this. And so good for him that he has the resources and the friends to push through a lawsuit like this. Because as you and I know, there are a lot of people who have been MeToo'd and we believe falsely accused, and they don't have the resources to sustain this kind of an expensive legal fight. So it seems that he does. And so I agree with you. This is something that had to be done. He had to come out. If these allegations that Lively made are not true, he had to come out swinging.
Yeah. And, you know, I will add too, I think it's interesting that when she first followed the suit, you know, there was her whole cast, it seemed like, was really coming out to back her. You know, Colleen Hoover was coming out, you know, to back her. She had this groundswell of support. But, you know, part of me is wondering too, you know, how much is that authentic, and how much is it that these people are just so scared to piss off that Reynolds Lively, you know, fame machine? It's like, right. Well, we better just pledge our allegiance because we want to save our own skin, and, you know, we want to make sure our careers are intact. So let's just, you know, sorry, Justin, then, we're going to side with who's going to be able to make sure we have a meal ticket. So, look, like I think there's a good chance that, Reynolds and Lively may never have even put these people on the spot to come out and support them. But people, I don't think, feel like they have a choice. I mean, we've seen, even with the political trends in Hollywood, there are so many people who, have come out as a conservative or come out as people who just don't like the Democrat policies, and how quickly it is that their careers are destroyed. So it's almost like you can't stay silent. You can't really speak out against it. You kind of do have to go with the machine.
I think that when you have a power couple, as you said, like Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, and I mean, they're worth, I'm sure, hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, they had the two most successful movies of last year, I believe, or two of the most successful movies, the Deadpool sequel, and then It Ends With Us, which ended up being a huge sleeper hit. But you were talking about how when you're dealing with that kind of power in Hollywood, that people are going to feel pressured, co-workers, cast members, to fall into line. And I just want to say something else too. I agree with that. And I just want to say something else too. People underestimate how cliquish and how high school Hollywood is. And it's just like in school when you have the popular, homecoming king and queen or cheerleader and football star, what have you. There's just a desire that people have to be with the in group. And so what you've got in terms of these cast members on It Ends With Us is you have a lot of lesser known actors or up and coming actors who, they may not actually know the truth about what went on between Baldoni and Lively, because some of this stuff is private one-on-one or not easy to verify. And they may just think, well, I don't really know what happened, but she seems like a nice woman and everything. And he seems kind of egotistical, maybe, and all of that. And so I'm just, I believe her, believe all women. Right. And so I could see where that would be kind of a natural thing for cast members to fall into line with not only the power couple, but also if they don't know one way or the other, to kind of shrug and say, well, of course, why wouldn't I believe her?
Well, and also just to add to that, it's so interesting because with his character being the abuser, it's sort of weird, off screen now we're, how can we really, it's like subconsciously we're already programmed to be thinking he's a bad guy because of his role, right? So
Right.
it's just an interesting, I think, dynamic. And then to go at that point, and this is not me saying that I agree with this guy, I texted this to you earlier, but David Sutcliffe, I think that's how you pronounce his name, he was one of the stars of the Gilmore Girls, and he tweeted out, you can't play the abuser and be the director. It's a mind fuck for the actors who's already in a vulnerable spot. The director must be neutral, safe. It can't be the guy who just violently threatened you in the last scene. Actors can't go there and then snap back to reality. It doesn't work that way. I have no idea who's telling the truth. It doesn't matter, and you can't, and it can never be known. But the mess was inevitable when Baldoni took on both jobs. Lively agreed to it. The deeper question is why they co-created this. I do think that is, it raises an interesting point, and I think that's kind of something to also be examined, like how much of him being already set up as the abuser is playing a kind of a role in not only the way that Blake was interacting with him, but the public's opinion of it. And it is a mindfuck.
It does seem very clear that she was really trying to more or less take over the film from him, and not only from him, but apparently from the editors too.
Right.
And I think that there might be, talk about inappropriate, unprofessional conduct. I think that there needs to be perhaps some kind of a SAG investigation, a professional investigation into how this actress, with the producer credit, but how this actress was able to come in and elbow her way in basically and freeze out in a lot of ways the director of this film and the other producer of this film, Baldoni. And, you're saying about Ryan Reynolds is interesting because one of the claims that Baldoni has made in his lawsuit is that Ryan Reynolds berated Baldoni on behalf of Reynolds' wife. And, Reynolds himself does not have a production credit on this film. It would be one thing if Reynolds himself were a producer on It Ends With Us. Then I'd say, well, okay, it makes a little more sense why his wife is asking him to come and sit in on a meeting with Baldoni and basically get in the middle of this and fight her battles for her. But Reynolds doesn't even have a production credit. And so when Lively started having issues with Baldoni, she had a big meeting with him in which she brought Ryan Reynolds to the meeting. And he apparently either he berated Baldoni, or Reynolds claims apparently that he spoke very sternly and passionately, but did not yell. Well, that kind of sounds like when my boyfriend and I get into fights and he's yelling at me and I'll say, stop yelling. And he'll say, I'm not yelling.
Yeah. I'll show you yelling. No.
Exactly. And so I think that, and also you were talking about Blake Lively and her history as a mean girl, perhaps. And I think that when a woman, a beautiful woman, has spent basically her entire adult life, and actually some of her youth as well, her adolescence, in the Hollywood industry, and she became a major star very quickly, from Gossip Girl on, and then, film, and then married Ryan Reynolds and part of a power couple now. I just wonder, after decades of being a big star and an influential person in Hollywood like that, if it just becomes impossible to have some humility about oneself. And so it does seem that whatever Baldoni may or may not have done, and if there was some inappropriate conduct on his part or not, it does seem that Blake Lively came in here with a big attitude and basically elbowed him aside. And they had these big creative differences that now have been turned into something more serious. And, one of my friends, Ari Jacob, who's a big YouTuber and is on Twitter, she's been talking about this a lot, and she has a lot of experience in Hollywood and the industry. And she says that oftentimes what happens is you have these creative differences on set, you have these power struggles, and then that gets built up into something more sinister and nefarious. And so, in this case, it sounds like it was just a battle of egos and a battle of creative visions, but Blake Lively now has kicked it up into these harassment allegations. Here's the big question that I have for you as a big PR consultant who's worked with a lot of people in Hollywood and Washington and other places. It seems pretty clear that one of Blake's big motivations in filing her complaint and in filing the lawsuit now is that she was trying to assign blame for this mean girl status that she's acquired over the last 6 months or so, and the attacks that she's been getting, I think, organically on social media that have nothing to do with Baldoni. But apparently one of the reasons why she filed this complaint and filed this lawsuit is she wants to assign public blame for the reputational damage that she has suffered over the past several months. And so this is my question to you. I feel like this is really bad strategy, because I thought that whole narrative about her was already starting to die down, and she had this giant success with, the sleeper hit that ended up being one of the biggest, most successful films of the year. She has a production credit on it, she's a star, all of this. I thought that she should have just taken her marbles, so to speak, and her success and the millions and millions of dollars now that she has made and moved on. And my feeling is that now, by filing this complaint with California and by filing this lawsuit, that now what she has ensured is that she's going to get months and months and even years now of sustained negative coverage.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I thought it was really surprising that they would want to kind of drag all this up again. I think it's crazy. I think it's counterproductive. I mean, everybody knows that people who consume entertainment like this, they have short memories. Yeah. And, Blake could go do something funny and super likable, and everybody would, probably be back, loving her again. I mean, these interviews, her with her father recently having passed, her being postpartum, women are very compassionate. Americans are very compassionate. We'll forgive, we'll forget, we don't care. Go do something funny. Like I said, make us laugh, make us like you again, take cute pictures with your sweet little babies with Ryan. Everybody wants to love a mommy, and, just, it would have been a very easy thing to weather. But, right. I don't think that these people are tethered in reality. And I also think that it's fascinating that the New York Times would accept such biased cuts of a story like this. It shocks me that the lawyers let it get this far. I don't know what kind of fact checking was in place, or, whether Justin's team was properly alerted. I mean, it really just blows my mind that the context of these texts and the edits and just the whole thing coming out. I mean, it is shocking. Well, I'm no lawyer, Lord knows, but it seems to me that Baldoni certainly has a case here. If the New York Times is just running with whatever Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds fame machine want them to run with, that's not okay.